Frankie Carrillo was 16 years old when he was arrested and wrongly convicted of murder in Los Angeles. It took nearly 20 years to prove his innocence.
Hi, my name is Frankie Carrillo. I am an exoneree. I spent 20 years in prison from the age of 16 to now 37 behind bars for something that I had nothing to do with. I am a full, willing participant in this movement to replace the death penalty in California with life without parole.
The most troubling thing we could ever do as a society is execute an innocent person.
Don Heller wrote California's death penalty law in 1978. He believes heinous killers should be severely punished. Don now says he made a huge mistake. He never anticipated the costs of the death penalty. He wants to stop the waste so we can use the savings to solve the 46% of murders and 56% of rapes that go unsolved in California each year. And with Yes on 34, we will never execute an innocent person.
It's death, so it had finality to it beyond any other case, because any other case, life without parole, the defendant's in jail. If a mistake was made, it can be corrected. In death cases, once the defendant's executed, there's no correction.
Well, I was 19 years old when I initially got incarcerated. It was back in 1995. I spent 17 years thereafter in the penitentiary, and today I'm 37 years old.
Jeannie Woodford is a former warden of San Quentin Prison. She oversaw 4 executions. Jeannie wants to replace the death penalty with life in prison without parole.
All across the United States, they found many people on death row who were actually innocent of the crime. And the last person who left death row in 2011 as an exoneree had been on death row in Texas for over 20 years.
More than 140 innocent people have been sentenced to death in the United States, and some have been executed.
I spent 17 and a half years in prison for a crime that I did not commit.
Back in 1972, I was committed to prison for 10 years for a crime that I didn't commit.
I spent 22 years in prison for a crime I did not commit, including 19 on death row. Cut the death penalty, spend that money on law enforcement, solve crimes.
Over the last 32 years, it's cost California taxpayers about $4 billion to have the death penalty, and over that period, 13 executions have been carried out.
The death penalty is far more expensive than life without possibility of parole, and there's been studies that show that. The Alarcon-Mitchell report has determined that it costs $184 million more per year to have someone on death row than if they had a sentence of life without possibility of parole.
When I wrote the initiative, I was never given any guidance by anyone as to the cost of carrying out the death penalty. Something that I actually didn't even think about, because my objective was to write a constitutionally valid statutory enactment, and I had no input into the cost of prosecuting capital cases.
Why does the death penalty cost more than life in prison without parole?
The cost for people on death row begins with the trial, which is far more expensive than a trial for something other than the death penalty.
It takes sometimes 25 years to execute someone in California. It takes 6 years to get a court-appointed lawyer to represent a defendant on death row.
They also have 2 trials instead of 1. They have a guilt phase trial and a punishment trial. Then they start their direct appeal process, which now takes about 10 years before the California Supreme Court decides whether the conviction should be affirmed or reversed.
It takes so many years for inmates to exhaust their legal appeals, and inmates sit on death row while we spend millions and millions of dollars on each of their cases.
In that same time period that 13 inmates were executed, over 80 have died of other causes.
The average time on death row in California is now approaching 30 years. So we have more inmates on death row who've died by natural causes or by suicide. And then there is the cost of incarceration. So inmates who are on death row are single celled, so that's one inmate per cell instead of two. So that increases the cost of incarceration. And those same inmates, if they had life without possibility of parole, they would be housed two to a cell. They would be able to take themselves to the services that they need. And they would also be required to work and give back to the citizens of the state of California by doing meaningful work inside our prison system.
People facing death have all kinds of privileges.
On death row, you have a legal team that's with you for your entire life. They visit you. They allow you to call them. As I said, they'll send you a TV. They'll send you letters, packages, cards. And so you have this whole support that is given to you at taxpayer expense. And that really is the difference. Life without possibility of parole holds people accountable. Life without possibility of parole is really what we have in this state when we say we have people on death row, because they actually will serve life without possibility of parole in most cases, except we're going to spend a great deal more money because they have the sentence of death.
Is the death penalty useful?
And so we know the death penalty is not a deterrent, because for a punishment to be a deterrent, it must be swift and it must be certain, and the death penalty is neither one. We also know that through much research that the best way to make our communities safer is to solve crime. And when you spend your resources on executions, as we have here in California on the death penalty, not on executions, but on the death penalty, having spent $4 billion since 1978 on trying to carry out executions, only having had 13 executions. You know that that's money that could have been spent solving unsolved homicides, as an example. 46% of homicides in the state go unsolved each year. Or solving reported rapes. 56% of rapes go unsolved in the state of California. And so if that money was put into solving homicides and rapes, our communities would be safer, because solving crime not only addresses that crime, it also prevents crime, because people know that crime will be solved, and that acts as a deterrent to criminal behavior. So it makes our communities safer, our neighborhoods safer, and our children safer.
It's a horrible economic depression we're in. We've cut schools. We've cut public safety. Policemen, firemen, all of the people who protect us. That makes no sense. It really makes no sense. In my opinion, we could make society safer and better by eliminating capital punishment, using the money that would have gone to lawyers, to experts, to the whole cast of characters that make up prosecution and defendant teams in capital cases. We could take that money, hire more police officers, hire better experts to detect crime and tie in defendants to criminal activity in the past. And that protects society, because we get whoever committed these cold cases off the street. Every time you take a real criminal off the streets, you're protecting someone else from a criminal act.
Prop 34 means we will never execute an innocent person in California. Many people think the death penalty is cheaper than life without parole, but that's simply not true. California is broke. Prop 34 saves money. We can save $1 billion in 5 years if we replace the death penalty with life in prison without the possibility of parole. Savings come from eliminating lawyers' fees and special death row housing. That's taxpayer money that would be better spent on law enforcement and our schools. Prop 34 makes the truly guilty spend the rest of their lives in prison behind bars with no hope of ever getting out. It makes them work and pay restitution to victims. Prop 34 saves tax dollars and directs $100 million of the savings for more DNA testing and other crime-solving tools to help the police solve rapes and murders, because the best way to prevent crime is to solve it. Please support the justice that works for everyone. Vote yes on 34. You can also spread the word through social media and help us spread the word by donating to Yes on 34, the Safe California campaign. Prop 34 is endorsed by the League of Women Voters of California, the California Catholic Conference of Bishops, the California State NAACP, LULAC, the California State Labor Federation, the California Democratic Party, the California Nurses Association, as well as nearly 2,000 organizations and over 10,000 individuals. Thank you.